Well, the president making his most direct attack yet on Donald Trump. In an interview with NPR, the president accusing Trump of capitalizing on the economic fears and frustration of blue-collar men, saying the Republican frontrunner is using that to fuel his campaign. Listen.
Blue-collar men have had a lot of trouble in this new economy where they're no longer getting the same bargain that they got when they were going to a factory. There's going to be potential anger, frustration, fear. Some of it justified, but just misdirected. I think somebody like Mr. Trump's taken advantage of that. That's what he's exploiting during the course of his campaign.
This tells me one thing, Harris. The fact that he spoke out and identified Trump by name tells me that they are petrified, the Democrats, that Trump is stealing blue-collar votes.
Yeah, and all they're doing is handing Donald Trump the bully pulpit by talking about him.
Yeah.
But, you know, it also speaks to the issue that Hillary Clinton has a soft spot. She's weak in that section where people are going to believe that she's one-on-one and can really feel their economic pain. It punches her in the gut, and they're shooting inside the tent. They don't even realize they're doing it. Because by pairing Donald Trump with blue-collar workers in any way, shape, or form in the same sentence and not doing it with or for Hillary Clinton is very problematic. It means she's got to make that journey by herself.
Can I just take that comment of the president's at face value for a second here? Of course Donald Trump is capitalizing on people's economic fears. People are fearful out there. There are a lot of people that are scared not only for themselves but for their children, thinking, my God, my kid's never going to make it. My kid's never going to be able to do what I was able to do. This country doesn't have the same freedom that it used to have. And so, yes, he's capitalizing. That's what he did in 2008 when he was running for president. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, but we are, 7 years later, Jillian? And under his leadership, the middle class is suffering more than ever. So it's a bit bizarre for the president to bring this point up because it reminds voters, as David points out, that people are hurting. And Hillary Clinton, let's remember her record as senator. There's a lot of blue-collar workers in upstate New York at the Kodak factory and other places that are waiting for those 200,000 jobs, Mrs. Clinton, that never came.
Well, a liberal argument that's been circulating for 7 years now is this, the narrative about the angry white man and about how Republicans are stealing those votes. Republicans are really doing a good job of rallying people who are angry. But as some people who have kind of dug into the weeds on this issue, like Charles Krauthammer and others, when you look at the statistics, it's a lot harder to find these angry people, right? It's easy to find them on cable television. You get a few people into the studio somewhere who are angry about something or other, and that's fine.
Oh,
when it comes to measuring
you don't think you can find the angry people?
Oh, I've seen them. I've seen hundreds of thousands of them at Bernie Sanders rallies.
Yeah,
that's where you see them, and that's exactly what Bernie Sanders is doing. That's what the left has been doing this entire time. That's one of the reasons the president was elected. That was the basis of the Occupy Wall Street movement. That was the point of the 1% narrative. And now Bernie Sanders is going full-blown redistribution.
By the way,
so the president is not allowed, in my rule book, to fan the flames of economic hysteria by pinning the tail on Donald Trump when his party and the far-left progressives in his party invented the game.
Also, you can quantify the fear factor by what Americans are doing with their money. There was just new statistics out about all the gas money that people are saving because the price of gas is down. They're not spending it. They're saving it. People are saving money like they've never saved money before, even though interest rates are at zero. You don't make any money when you save it because they're afraid.
There's also the unknown. You've got the unknowns about Obamacare. Some taxes have just been pushed down the road. So people are packing their nuts in their cheeks like squirrels because they're not quite sure. So that is an indication. But their standard of living has also changed. So in order to get back to X amount of dollars, some people are having to work 2 and 3 jobs. I mean, that is a visceral reality. And I don't agree with you. I think that there are a lot of angry people out there. You don't have to culminate them all in one elevator at a news studio. They exist all over the place. They're speaking with Bernie Sanders. They're talking with Donald Trump. They're at these rallies, and they're not white, black. They're everybody.
Well, that was my point. My point is that the myth of the middle-aged or 30 to 55-year-old white angry male is not an accurate portrayal of what the population is right now.
No,
That's
it is.
Not
if
really,
your green is hurting,
anger is not isolated to that population.
You're wrong. You're wrong about this. And this goes deeper. This is cultural. Men have been feminized by the left. Culturally, there has been a movement to emasculate men across America. And I believe that this is an indication that a vote for someone like Donald Trump, who represents their values, these middle-class men that are just getting screwed right and left by this leftist administration, is someone who represents their values. This is a trend. I see it. I hear it from men. I know it. We've got them all around New York. They're coming out of the woodwork because they just feel like they don't have a voice anymore. It's a woman's world, and they're sick of it. And Donald Trump, I think, shares their values. And I'd watch that very closely. You're all looking at me.
And you know what? He doesn't. The fact that he's a billionaire, because we talk about Hillary Clinton being disconnected from people. She's never had a blue collar job, but neither is Donald Trump. He's probably got hands softer than most 6-month-old babies. But even though he's got $10 billion, and he'll remind you of that. He still knows how to tap into that.
It's a demographic that the Republicans have lost consecutively. Democrats think that they own. Reagan was able to do it, and I think Trump might be able to do it this time around. And that's why Democrats are scared to death.
All right, we will see.
Meantime, House Speaker Paul Ryan. Oh, I'm reading you, David.
That's all right. You do a better job.
No.
Well, we're going to talk about Paul Ryan because meantime, House Speaker Paul Ryan is slamming President Obama's suggestion that the media is hyping up ISIS in order to get ratings, saying the president should blame his failed policies for the results he's getting instead of poor messaging. Through his office, Ryan says it's not the first time President Obama has blamed, quote, poor communications for America's discontent. His office notes that Obama blamed his messaging for Democratic losses in Congress in the last 2 midterm elections, as well as people's resistance to Obamacare. I got to tell you, Jillian, I was shocked when he was belittling the nation's fears about terrorism, blaming that on the media rather than on terrorism.
Yeah, and something really interesting that the president said to NPR this week or last week was that he totally now understands that he thinks there's this legitimate criticism of him and his administration because they have failed to communicate to the American people everything that they're doing to combat ISIS, as if the discontent and the disagreement is a matter of PR rather than what's actually happening on the ground. As if he did a better job of explaining to people what he was doing and what his approach is, then he could get the American people on his side.
Right.
And that's a myth. What the American people care about is, are we effective on the ground? Are we degrading and defeating ISIS the way he committed to do?
Bingo. I think that's the point. If you defeat ISIS, ISIS will lose a lot, not only on the ground, but they'll also lose that propaganda advantage.
That's the disconnect in the communications. And he can blame media, he can blame whomever he'd like. But he's not answering the question that the American public is asking. Are we safe?
Yeah.
We're not asking the question when you do the polling. The question isn't, what is your four-pronged plan again, Mr. President, after an Oval Office, a Pentagon, and a National Terrorism Center speech and news conferences there? What is your plan? That's not what they're asking. They're saying, how are you going to keep us safe and can you make us feel better going into the Christmas season? That language was not in any of those talks that he gave the American
And
public.
are we living up to our objectives? Are we degrading?
Well, no, you can't live up to objectives you don't list.
Well,
and that's the problem.
But degrading and defeating ISIS was been on the table for a year and a half now.
But he's trying to just very quickly. He's trying to somehow make this a smaller story. He comes out and waves his finger about gun control after every mass shooting. Tries to turn this into a mass shooting because for him, an admission of terrorism is an admission of failure.
To Kennedy's point, Andrea, he says these guys with masks or black flags are coming to get you. He's talking about the American public and their perception of ISIS, or at least the media's description of that. But the point is, he's doing it in kind of a belittling. It's like the boogeyman. Your kid's afraid of the boogeyman. That's all ISIS is. He's just the boogeyman, something you don't need to really be afraid of, when in fact they're terrorists that cut people's heads off.
Right, well, he's trivializing it.
Yeah.
I mean, and he doesn't take it seriously. I mean, he went to go golfing after he checked the box to quickly announce that James Foley had been beheaded. He doesn't take the threat seriously. Liberals are completely weak on foreign policy. And again, I'm going to go back to that theme I was hitting earlier about middle-class men. You mentioned Obamacare. Who's really getting hit by Obamacare? Men. Yeah. Men are paying higher premiums. They're the ones suffering under this economy. They're the ones seeing the threat of ISIS grow. Women are too, but they're seeing this threat grow. They see the potential that more men could be sent off to fight ISIS. And then you have Hillary Clinton and the Democrats talking about birth control. I mean, really, women's contraception? This country has been completely feminized and completely misled as far as what the priorities are, and it's been by this president and Hillary Clinton, who wants the next job.
Well, Mr. President, I guess he thinks we're paranoid for thinking about this and reporting it. But just because you're paranoid, someone famous once said, doesn't mean they're not out to get you. You have to. They keep telling us to be vigilant, to see something, say something. They keep telling us to prepare here on the homeland. Anything could happen. Any lone wolf, a change in the terror system, so on and so forth. Yeah. But then the coupled messages, don't worry, you're overreacting, and the media is at fault.
All right, that's got to be the last word on this segment. Meanwhile, it's been more than 14 years since 9/11, yet the 5 men accused of orchestrating the attacks are still waiting for their trial, and it could be years before justice is finally served. The reason for the wait that has victims' families furious coming next.